It's time to unleash the expert. What is he an expert on? Relationships, sex, spirituality, and rediscovering yourself beyond the trauma. Get ready to unleash more purpose, passion, and pleasure in your life. Here's the expert himself, Mr. Brandon Patrick.
Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my episode with Steve Moore. I'm glad you're back. I actually have so much to dig into from that episode. So it's been a little hard for me because I haven't known whether I want to go into more depth on everything that we talked about, or if I want to just do a broad view of everything that we talked about. We went kind of 10,000 miles a minute there on that episode. And you got to understand, when I talk to Steve, it's 2 therapists who have been treating sex addiction for over a decade each. And Steve talks about his own personal experience with recovery. We've also been engulfed in the cultural aspect of living in a really religious place and treating sex addiction. And so Steve and I have a lot of wisdom and knowledge and perspective that I think a lot of people don't understand. And I think a lot of the things that we were talking about, you were hearing a lot of that experience that we've had. Now we were being a little bit, we were kind of joking a little bit and tongue in cheek with some of it, but Steve was also sharing his personal experience, which I luckily got to be a part of because I got to see him change a lot and strengthen his recovery a lot. It's interesting. Steve's a sex addiction therapist in Utah County. I have been for a long time. I don't consider he and I competitors by any means. If anything, we support each other. We help each other. There's more than enough business to go around here. One thing that we both understand is this really kind of sick and twisted dynamic of, business is pretty good when you treat sex addiction in a rigid place, in a cultural place where they reject sexuality. Then the business of sex addiction treatment is really good. And I'm not telling you this because I'm saying this is awesome. Yay, I've made a living off of this. I'm telling you this because it says something. Why in a very religious place is the business of sex addiction treatment so steady? And it has to do with what I talked about in that episode of that Chinese finger trap, is when somebody comes in feeling like they're bad and broken as a sexual being and they're trying to stop, it leads to more compulsive sexual behaviors, more secrecy, and more shame. And it compounds the problem again and again. And Steve's the man because he's a good therapist. But a lot of therapists will compound the problem. They will treat sex addiction by teaching individuals how to reject their sexuality. And they will create more shame and more force and more control, which will lead back to more compulsive behaviors. And there's a huge component in sex addiction treatment that has been missing, especially around these parts. And it's really interesting that sex addiction treatment, most of the programs and a lot of the programs that are developed from a Judeo-Christian cultural background. And so there is a component of religiosity intermingled in the clinical side of sexual addiction treatment. And there's actually a big debate online and in the world whether treating sex addiction is a good thing or not, and if sex addiction is even real. And where I stand on that is absolutely sex addiction is real. Absolutely sex addiction exists. But our sexuality and being sexual beings does not mean that we're sex addicts. And the 2 extremes actually cause the problems, where on one extreme, it's sexuality is lust. Lust is bad. Sexuality, therefore, is bad. You should shame yourself and force yourself to be non-sexual. That's kind of that side of the fence. The other side of the fence is sex addiction isn't even a real thing. If you call sex addiction a thing, then you're just creating shame inside of people, and people should be able to just go do whatever they want as a sexual being. But the fact of the matter is you can totally accept your sexuality, and you can choose what you want to engage in and be an open, honest human being about that, but also have some healthy control and boundaries. But the piece that's missing in sexual addiction treatment is that part of sexual acceptance. And it's triggering to a spouse, it's triggering even to somebody who's scared of their own sexuality to say, the pathway to healing for you and the pathway to stepping into your power is actually accepting who you are, accepting your arousal template, loving that you're a sexual being, noticing your sexuality and embracing it. That actually will help you to choose what you want to engage in and what you don't want to engage in. Steve and I we got into the seeds of shame and sexual self-rejection. He talked personally about his experience as a young kid. He went through hell. Like, he really did. He went through hell. It's unfair. His dad died. He got cancer, all this stuff. And it was interesting how, as he started to act out sexually, how he started to tie things together. I act out sexually and these bad things happen to me because God is punishing me. God's not there for me. I don't deserve God's love. Teaching sexual self-rejection actually creates disconnection from God. So we got it totally, totally backwards in religion. We think that teaching sexual self-rejection leads to righteousness, which then leads to connection to God. Bullshit. That's not how it works. Teaching sexual self-rejection leads to shame, leads to not like a real confusion with who you are. We are all sexual beings. We all have sexuality inside of us, and that is of God. And when we try to force ourselves not to be sexual, that reality doesn't exist. And so what we start to believe at a very young age is, if I can't control my sexuality, and if I can't not be sexual, I therefore must be bad. I'm a pervert. I'm disgusting. God's not happy with me. But guess what? Your sexuality persists. It doesn't go away. As much as you try to be righteous and force yourself, it doesn't go away. At church, religion, God, spirituality, we need to teach sexuality is beautiful. Sexuality is good. Sexuality is righteous. Now there's a paradox for you. Sexuality is righteous. I get this question all the time. I teach at churches, but I got this question just the other day. I can't rely on God for help because to control my sexuality, because my sexual sins make me unworthy of God's love. What? Like, come on. Yet I totally understand why that person feels that way. Like, God is so disgusted with me that God's not going to help me overcome this natural part of me. Do you see how stuck we are? How twisted this is? I'm trying to not be who God made me to be. And I'm trying really hard to not be that. But I can't not be who God made me to be. So therefore, God must not love me or be there for me. We're so removed from the reality here and the nature of God here. But it's twisted, and the adversary has twisted it so well Steve talked about this in our episode. He talked about how, if the adversary can get us to believe that this thing that's so innately inside of us is disgusting and bad, that's the best thing the adversary can do. Teach us that we, in and of ourselves, are sin. We are bad. Then it's just like this perpetual self-rejection that goes on and on and on. He told a story that was fascinating when he was talking about talking to that stripper about how she can be forgiven and she can be loved no matter what she's done, and how he's saying that to her, and thinking, I actually believe this. When I'm telling this woman these things, I believe this. However, this doesn't apply to me because I should know better. Do you see how that shame has locked itself in? If he masturbated the night before and then he's talking to her and saying you can be forgiven, but he's like, no, but like I need to be punished. I need to be disconnected from God because like I'm better than that. But her, with whatever she's done, like God can totally forgive that. Shame is isolating, and it puts you in a dark tunnel where you feel so alone. And so that's the nature of shame right there for you, and what he's describing. I can preach God's love, I can teach forgiveness, I can teach grace, I can teach the atonement to somebody else, but what I can't do is surrender and accept it myself. I actually love when he talked about his fuck it moment, when he was trying so hard to do it all the right ways. He was trying to do it for his wife. He was trying to be good enough. He was trying to do it for all those reasons. And finally he got to this place of fuck it. And to me, that's so profound, because he got to a place of turning his will and his life over the care of God. And I think in that moment, he realized the pathway to freedom here is not through forcing myself to be good enough for anybody. Fuck it. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be open. I'm going to be a transparent man. And guess what? When you surrender that and you let that go, that's when you start to feel God's love. Because the adversary is not in between there saying all the time, you should do this, you should do that. You should shift this, you should shift that in order to be good enough. When he turned his will and his life over the care of God, he started to open up the possibility of accepting all things. And part of that accepting all things is accepting himself. I really liked his analogy of the caliber of gun that you put up to somebody's head. It's like, if you can get a bigger caliber gun, then they're more likely to not do that behavior. And that's actually true for a little while. Like if we can stack up the consequences of not doing something, then you're going to be motivated for a little while. And when I shared, the word hafter-baiting, believe it or not, you guys, I've heard that word a lot. And in my circles, things like that aren't uncommon. It's like, okay, I didn't orgasm. I didn't go cross that line, so therefore I don't have to tattletale on myself. I don't have to have the consequences because I only went so far. But do you see the white knuckle there? Do you see the trickiness and the secrecy? Like there's a whole other way than trying to force yourself to not orgasm. You can choose to not orgasm without using force. But there's a much more powerful way to do that, and that's through self-acceptance, not through self-rejection. And we don't need a gun to the side of our head in order to be good. God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. We are created in the image of God, and God is sexual. We don't need fear to protect ourselves. Fear does not protect. What protects is facing and accepting reality and then choosing into what we want. God does not endorse sexual rejection. In fact, Steve brought this up of, maybe God's, and I don't want to speak for God here, but maybe God's extremely frustrated at how much we reject and force ourselves to be shameful around sexuality. Maybe sexuality is one of God's greatest creations, one of the most incredible miracles that we have in our life. And from a young age, we start to believe that it's of Satan. It comes from the adversary. And what we need to do is force ourselves to be careful with it because it's so scary and nasty and awful. Sexuality and sex equals sin. I don't think that's how God looks at it, in my opinion. And it's probably, I doubt God actually gets frustrated, but the adversary is probably laughing pretty hard when he's like, hey, like this sexual thing, this thing that's so part of who they are, they think is just sinful. And that's all it is. It's perfect for the adversary. It creates what I call sexual scrupulosity, which it leads. It's like a shame production facility plant. Sexual scrupulosity. Let me explain. When I believe that everything I do and everything I am as a sexual being equals sin, that means that I'm always sinning, which means I'm always bad, which means I'm always disconnected from God. So if I walk outside, I see a beautiful person that I'm attracted to and my sexuality fires off just because I have attraction, it means I'm bad. If I have a thought, if I have euphoric recall, I call it, where out of nowhere a sexual thought comes into my mind, I'm bad. If I'm watching a movie next to my wife and a scene comes on that triggers something sexually, I'm bad. And I need to reject this. I'm not okay. Don't buy into the fallacy that if I let go of this sexual self-rejection, then I'll just go nuts. And that's the fear. That's the fear-based model is because what you might be listening to me thinking, well, what are you saying, Brandon? What were you and Steve saying? Are you saying that, like that we should just accept everything about sex and just go out and have sex with whomever and whatever? No, we're not saying that at all. But if you're so stuck in the model of self-rejection, then you're going to be very uncomfortable with what I'm talking about. Because what I'm talking about is actual honesty with yourself, that there is sexuality inside of you. Both men and women, we all have sexuality. We all have fantasies. We all have attraction. We all have an arousal template. We all have things that we like. And our sexuality is individual to us. And then we come together in a relationship, and with transparency and honesty and openness, we connect that sexuality to somebody else, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. That doesn't mean that then I have to reject my own individual sexuality to be in a relationship with somebody else. I can be honest and open and transparent still, and I can still honor and accept the boundaries within that relationship. But I still can be honest, open, and transparent about who I am. And I can work together with my partner, and she can work together with me on seeing each other and accepting who we are as spiritual, sexual beings. All right. I want to wrap this up. This obviously is a topic I'm very passionate about. And one reason I'm so passionate about it is because I spent a good part of my childhood in this model of sexual self-rejection. I spent a good part of my early adulthood treating and teaching sexual self-rejection. And I'm not proud of that, but I thought that I was doing good. I thought it was righteous and good, and I was helping people in these subtle ways learn how to reject themselves, and it was creating shame and anxiety and all these things. I'm done with that. And I know that doesn't work. I know it doesn't work from a personal standpoint, my own experience, but I also know it doesn't work from watching these programs and watching all of these messages of sexual self-rejection and shame. Does not create peace, does not create healing, and it does not create freedom. All right, you guys, if you have thoughts, comments, experiences with this, please comment below. I would love to hear what you have to say, and have a wonderful day. We'll see you later.